Our Christian faith is reasonable. It is not illogical or incomprehensible or silly. And St. Peter tells us in his first letter that we should always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that is within us. So with that in mind, I want today to look at the historical fact of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Because St. Paul tells us if Christ had not been raised from the dead, then our faith is in vain. Sometimes today we hear of Christians, even Catholics, that say, well, if they prove that Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, we could still be Christians. And nothing could be further from the truth. That is really nonsense. So we should first ask, how do we judge the truth of a historical claim? Well, we know that we can't do it in a laboratory. We can't do it using the scientific method. It's not a problem for science or for math. To judge the truth of a historical claim, we have to look at the evidence. For example, we ask ourselves, were there eyewitnesses? Are there documents? And are there artifacts from this event? Today we have things like photographs and videos, but in the past, it might be debris and footprints and nails and crosses and tombs and things like that. And then we ask, are all of these things consistent? Are the witnesses and the documents reliable? And does it all go together? And imagine if you were on a jury for a trial, what would you do? Well, you would sit there and they would bring forth witnesses. And then you have to decide, are these people telling the truth or are they a bunch of liars? And then you look at the documents and say, does this make sense with what they've said? And the artifacts, whether those are like a bloody knife or whatever it might be, and say, does this all go together? And then you have to decide, is this true beyond a reasonable doubt? Do I believe this? And then they give their answer. And that's the same thing for judging historical claims. And so we can do that to the resurrection of Jesus. And this is a giant topic, so there's so much that we'll have to leave out today, including the counter-arguments against it. But we can ask the first question, were there witnesses? Are there documents? The answer is, of course there are. We have the New Testament that tells us about these historical claims. And as Christians, we believe that God's Word is inspired and inerrant. But if we set that aside for the sake of argument, we know that these are historical documents. And all scholars who study the Bible, even if they're believers or not, they know that these are historical and they can believe these things. One, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified and died, that he was buried, and that 3 days later the tomb was empty, that his disciples were filled with fear and despair because of his death, and that they truly believed that he appeared to them, risen and alive and well after his death. And not just one or two persons, but literally hundreds. St. Paul says that at one time, Jesus appeared to 500 people at once. And we hear about one of these appearances in today's gospel to Thomas, who was skeptical and doubtful until he was able to touch the wounds in the side of Christ. And so these disciples who were once fearful and despairing now are filled with so much hope and joy that they will profess this truth even with their own lives, even to the point of suffering. And all of these things happen in really ordinary circumstances. These weren't dreams that they had. They hadn't been drinking all day. This wasn't too much time spent in the sun. They were walking down roads. They were having something to eat. They were gathered in an upper room. They were fishing and they saw Jesus on the shore. And they preached these things even in Jerusalem where this all happened. So all those people that heard them, they could go and confirm the claims. You could walk over and see, is the tomb really empty? They could talk to the people that were involved. And then, yet they did this because they truly believed it. And then we also have the example of St. Paul, who fervently wanted to destroy this group of people and their claim, but then he had an encounter with the risen Lord too, and he became a fervent apostle after having been an enemy of Christ and his church. So, yes, we have witnesses and documentation, and they're trustworthy and reliable, and we can believe them. What about artifacts? Are there any artifacts from this? Yes. We know where the tomb's at. It's called the Holy Sepulchre. And in the 4th century, St. Helena went to Jerusalem, and she brought back all of these things. She brought back the title that's above the cross, the INRI. That's in Rome. She brought back pieces of the true cross, the nails. The crown of thorns is in Paris, France. I've seen it with my own eyes. And on top of that, we also have the burial cloths. The one that wrapped the face of Jesus, which is called the sudarium, or the face cloth, and then also the Shroud of Turin. And these things match each other. And what's amazing, I wish we had more time to talk about this, today as our scientific investigations have advanced, the Shroud of Turin is looking more and more and more like it's the real thing, like it's a relic from an absolutely unique event. So when we take all these things together, the witnesses, the documents, the artifacts, we understand that the claims of the resurrection of Jesus are convincing. They are consistent and they are reliable. So convincing, in fact, that billions of people have believed this all throughout the world and across the centuries. And so with the simple light of reason, we too should be convinced of this truth. But we also have the light of faith, by which we know that God's word does not and cannot deceive. And we know that by faith, that the church is a living witness to this truth, that from the beginning until the end of time, the church will profess this, as we do in the Creed. So, our faith is reasonable. Our faith has a sure foundation, and we should be filled with hope, because Jesus is risen, and he lives. And this confirms everything that he said. Now today, in addition to my homily, I want to add a little bit. I want to say two things about this so-called Equality Act that has passed its way through the House of Representatives, supported by the President, and is in the Senate right now. And just two things. First of all, we should call gender ideology for what it is. It is a lie, and it is an assault on reality. We know from our common sense and our experience that there are only two sexes, male and female, and that these are fixed and not changeable. And we know this not just from humans, but also from the rest of creation. You guys know this as well as I do. There are cows and bulls. There are hens and roosters. There are does and bucks. There are ewes and rams, and on and on and on and on. And in the sacred words of Genesis, we hear God made them male and female. So being male and being female is willed by God, and it is good. And to deny this is to deny reality, and it is an act of rebellion against the Creator and against his nature. And where is it going to end? Are they going to deny that this church is made of bricks? Are they going to deny that leaves are green in the summer? Are they going to deny that 2 + 2 = 4? Where will it end? And so, in healthy times, reason defends and clarifies faith. Just like we know by faith that Jesus rose, and by reason we can defend that. But in times when we have widespread ideology, then faith defends reason. Faith says what you see with your own two eyes and what you experience is true. And we can believe that. And so religion might become the last bastion of sanity in our world, the last reasonable place to be. And that's why it leads me to the second point, which is, if this is passed, it will put into the crosshairs religious individuals, groups, and organizations, which includes, but is not limited to, Catholic parents and families, Catholic doctors, nurses, and hospitals, Catholic schools and organizations, and many others as well. And it really is an attack, especially on women, our mothers and sisters, our daughters and granddaughters. And it is, to top it all off, it will expand abortion. And it will likely force Catholic doctors and hospitals to perform them against their conscience. So, to sum it up, the so-called Equality Act discriminates against people of faith. It threatens unborn human life. It undermines the common good. It is an assault on reality. And so we should be of one mind and heart on this issue, as we heard in today's first reading, and we should oppose it vocally and through our elected leaders. And we should pray and fast that this doesn't get passed, because it will cause all kinds of problems for us and for many others. And we should defend and uphold God's beautiful creation and the nature that He's written into all of our hearts. And we should love all of His children, as St. John says, and keep His commandments. But we should love people in truth and share with them the truth. And if we believe that Jesus is the Son of God and we hold firm to this, then as we heard, our faith will overcome. Our faith is the victory that overcomes the world. So let us hold fast to this faith and defend what is right and good in our world today. Today